Hello, my name is Stan Copeland, and I'm the pastor of Lovers Lane United Methodist Church and a member of the North Texas Conference. And we have just been in a session that our bishop has invited us to. The session was basically LGBTQ folk and their allies. And it was a wonderful time together, and I've gathered some of our colleagues and friends together to talk a little bit about what went on tonight and maybe a little bit of what's going on in their churches and perhaps some hope that we sense tonight after the meeting. So I'm asking them to introduce themselves and the church they're coming from, and then we'll have a discussion. So Sinclair, why don't you start?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Sinclair Freeman, and I am from Copeland United Methodist Church and Union Coffee Shop.
Fantastic.
Hi everyone, I'm Sharon Bradley. One foot at First United Methodist Richardson, the other foot squarely at Greenland Hills in East Dallas.
I'm John Horani, and I'm from Oak Lawn United Methodist.
Hi, I'm Matt Windsor-Johns, and I'm a member here at Lovers Lane United Methodist Church.
And I'm Cody McMahon, and I'm at North Haven United Methodist Church.
Hi, my name is Allison Bray. I'm a member at Union Coffee House.
Hello, my name is Eric Markinson. I'm at Grace Church, Dallas.
And I'm Robert Lathan, and I'm also a member here at Lovers Lane United Methodist Church.
All right. Well, we talked a lot about round tables, and we also had some conversation with the larger room. There were nearly 400 people in the room tonight. So what are some of your takeaways from that? Just anybody who'd like to chime in, and we'll go from there.
One of the things that I thought was interesting is we had several people from our church, and then a couple of people who were from more of a suburban church that's not exactly where our church is in the process of recognizing gay and lesbian folks. And it was, we have to recognize that people are coming and living in different spaces, and where they're moving towards is what matters, not just what's been accomplished thus far. The universal thing that I heard from everyone, from all of the tables, was pain. I heard a lot of pain.
It was very good to hear that we had alliances and support from not just the gay community, and that everyone is still willing to fight, because in the initial reaction, I wondered who's really caring, who's really doing all of this for us. And so it was nice to come tonight and hear that everybody is on board.
I love the amount of allies that were in the room tonight, and I think the bishop mentioned that towards the end of his presentation about how 10 years ago the room would have been much different, and tonight you could look around and people were overtly talking about that, and I thought that was fantastic and really honoring the fact that many people were allies because their kids were in that community, the alphabet community, if you will, or maybe other loved ones, and now we're starting to talk about it openly in our society, and that's obviously trickling into this community as well. That was promising to me, hopeful.
I think the hard thing about conversations like this is that systemically, LGBTQ people, we feel like we don't belong anyway in our own country, in our own state, and a lot of us find refuge in church. And I grew up going to church and it not only being something that we had to do, but something that we really wanted to do. That's where my friend group was. That's where my support system was. And being an adult now and making my own decisions, that's something I've wanted to carry on. And it feels like just another kick in the stomach when your refuge doesn't want you. And I love that, tonight we had the conversation, because I grew up in a different church growing up where you couldn't bring this up at all. And if you did, it was the sin above all sins. So I love that we're even having the conversation. I think that's the first step. And I really hope it doesn't end here tonight, because if it does, then everyone's lost.
It's certainly a joy to be in a room with allies and people who think the same way you do. I was a little bit surprised at my table to find a couple here from a local church who pretty clearly identified as not allies, and that they had serious questions and a fair bit of turmoil around where do we fit into this? And that's just a reminder that there are still conversations to have with people who are struggling with this issue, and that those conversations are deep and they take a long time, and we'll need to continue those conversations when we go back to our churches.
I heard at our table a discussion about people's reactions that included a grief reaction. And I think that I find in my own life a fair amount of grief over the loss of what's familiar. At the same time, I believe and I hope that there is great potential for change and for the future. And what I'm concerned about is that there are institutional pressures, financial, administrative, bureaucratic, that are tying us together in a system that is clearly broken in the name of a denomination, when in fact what we worship is God, and we worship a loving God who accepts all people. And if we allow ourselves to be tied up with our history, our denomination, our traditions, I feel like we lose sight of that divine message, and that instead we are slaves to worshiping at the altar of the United Methodist Church. And I personally feel like we have to break free from that. And it's terrifying. It is terrifying. But at the same time, I find it very liberating, and I think that we need to march forward without fear, and that we need to hold our heads high and proclaim the message that God loves all, and that everybody has a place in church.
Something I heard a lot tonight was a desire for action steps to move forward, and what do we do and where do we go, and the bishop spoke at the beginning of the night about some things happening that he couldn't be transparent about, and that was a moment of hope for me, and a couple of conferences that are happening around the country. But my community is a lot of young people, a lot of young LGBTQ plus people, and we're part of a generation who has this need for action and protest ingrained in us. It's a world of injustice right now, and we are in the heart of the justice-centered generation. My community is. And so to hear that so many people were latching on to that with us makes me hopeful, and I'm hopeful moving forward that we will get more concrete things that laity can do in addition to just the regular ally work that we do on a daily basis, that allies and people who are in the community do. I would be excited to learn specifically for the church what we can do going forward.
I was encouraged by that, but I find it difficult to have hope.
Yeah.
Hope seems to me dangerous right now.
Yeah.
And I'm at least one generation separated from you, but the status quo is no longer acceptable.
Yeah.
And the private conversations that don't involve us and give us a place to make sure that we're moving are no longer acceptable.
Yeah.
I understand strategy, but I also think that we really need to be moving as a community of laity and clergy and higher leadership instead of little pieces disconnected from each other.
You know, the bishop said something tonight about he'd never seen the kind of uprising that we're seeing in the churches. And as a pastor of this church, I could say the same thing. I mean, people who you might have thought were, kind of non-committal on this issue have been very vocal in speaking out like we've never heard before. It's almost like what happened at General Conference in February. It tilted things in a really different way. Are you sensing that in your church? Are you sensing that in conversations that you're hearing, or what's going on in your place?
Well, I think that our church is a particularly unique location because I believe that we have very much a common mind. And I feel like we are blessed in a way with the size of our congregation because we have, I believe, a pretty unified front on where we think our church's mission is, the community that we serve, the people that we serve, the kinds of social justice that we do. And that's the other issue I heard tonight that I want to amplify, that there's so many other things that the church could be focused on. So many ways in which we could reaching the unchurched, teaching people about Jesus, and helping the homeless, the poor, the least of these. But yet here we find ourselves caught up in a cultural war issue that has largely been decided by our culture at large, but we still are fighting this same battle. And I, like you just said, I'm so tired of this. I'm so tired of fighting this, and I believe that for better or for worse, General Conference 2019 was to decide this issue. It did not come out the way that I had hoped and wanted it to come out, but it was decided. And so I feel like the responsible task for us is to plot the best way forward so that we can move together to the extent we can be together. And I think that there are going to be churches, and I feel for you, Pastor, in this huge, large metropolitan church with many different groups of people of different minds. Holding that together, it must be a real challenge. But I feel like there is a decided progressive movement, certainly in our church, that wants to take concrete steps to affirm everyone's worth and everyone's dignity.
We don't talk about that a lot at my church, and nor do we talk about that a lot at my table. I think if someone were to throw out at Union that they haven't ever seen an uprising like this in the Methodist Church, it would be met with a lot of frustration. Especially if he was alluding to being alive when the Methodist Church was moving from the Methodist to the Uniting Methodist Church. And if this uprising didn't happen then, that frustrates me for what's going to happen moving forward. If we're still where we are.
My perspective as a high school Sunday school teacher, got ninth graders, and the week after this happened, pretty much the regular curriculum went to the side, and the kids brought it up, like, we start the Sunday school with what's going on in your mind this week, and I didn't really know if it was going to come up or not, and it did, and it ended up being a fantastic discussion. I think much like the folks that you're working with, the next generation, if we don't take care of this, they're going to take care of it some way or another, because they just have no tolerance for this injustice. They're just not going to stand for it. They're going to do what they want. They're going to run from these big organizations and figure out what's next for them. And it's going to be in coffee houses. It's going to be in club rooms. It's going to be,
Well, don't you think that that's already happening?
I
That's the reality that I think we're facing is we are keeping hold of this model that is failing. And the fastest growing group of people is no spirituality. It's not the people who are going to church every week, and that's what we have to be entrepreneurial, as we say at our church, and reach out to people in new and different ways and find them where they are, as opposed to doing the same old, same old, same old. Because guess what? That dog don't hunt. And it's not working.
And the problem with that is not one of church growth. It's not one of our club is shrinking or we're not reaching the souls or whatever. We believe that Jesus and an encounter with Jesus changes us for the better. That it gives us the strength to suffer through the pain that this life and this world gives us. And this infighting, this chaos is keeping us. I love North Haven, but I'm not inviting anyone. Even though I think that there are a lot of young people, a lot of people my age, a lot of people in the gay community who need that message. But it's a mixed message right now. And this all is interfering with me sharing something that matters immensely to me, that is a source of strength for me, is a source of healing for me. And I don't know what to do with that. I want to be able to invite people to my church. I want to be able to not have to say, I'm not that kind of Christian.
My church has the luxury of being very much of one mind in terms of staying as a congregation and being an inclusive congregation. And that's a grace and a blessing for me. I still can't help but think of Jesus' vision that the reign of God is so all-inclusive that even those people who struggle with this issue might come to the table. And Cody pointed this out to me earlier today, but just this notion that somehow our culture right now is not able to speak at one table together. We're speaking from other sides of the room. We're shouting at each other. We're flinging barbs. We're trying to win, certainly in terms of the cultural wars, rather than lifting a glass with people who are different than us, welcoming them to the grace that we share, and trying to understand. And that's incredibly painful for me, because I have friends all over the spectrum, but oftentimes, not unlike others, it's nice to go back to my little safe haven here. And is that the right thing for the church? Should we close in and be, our fully inclusive church without being ready to open the doors and participate in a cultural movement to welcome all people and their opinions?
Well, I would caution that, actually.
Sure.
Because for 40 years now, this has been a discussion. And for 40 years, LGBTQIA folks have been the sacrifice that has been paid for that unity.
Yeah.
And so if our goal is to include everyone at the price of people like me and the next generation of people like me, I have a problem with that. I don't know what to do with that. I want to be in conversation with people who are different than me, and I don't mind those people being in my church or in my community, in my Sunday school class, whatever, but I don't want them to have the power to harm that they've had for the past 40 years.
Well, we've institutionalized this division. Our church made a point of institutionalizing this division. For some are complicated reasons, some very, very simple reasons, and it's time. We're all exhausted about that. And as a member of the LGBTQ plus community, there are more important things to be doing than spending time on this. So I'm not going to get into a fist fight over this, but it's clear where the gospel stands, and I can make that argument pretty soundly. So
I'm going to be super transparent for a minute. My struggle tonight, if I'm just being totally honest, was I love that we were able to air our grievances and talk about what's going on. I hope this is okay to say, but I looked around and I was like, I don't see a lot of people of color here.
Thank you.
I don't see a lot of trans people here. I don't see, I don't know, my struggle was, if I as a white, gay, cisgender man feel this hurt, I can't imagine the hurt. The layers of hurt for communities of color, for trans people. I can walk into a room and I can try to fake it that I'm not gay for a little bit to fit in with. I did that in the Church of Christ for a long time. And I went to a Church of Christ university where if you were found out to be gay, you were either kicked out of the university or you were sent to Celebrate Recovery. And I went to Celebrate Recovery and I sat in there and I was like, what is going on? This isn't where I'm supposed to be. But my struggle tonight was, I love that we're starting this conversation, but I feel like there's layers and layers and layers and layers of conversations that we still have to have about the Methodist Church as a whole. And I have not been to every Methodist church in the United States or even in Dallas, but the ones that I've seen is there's not a lot of communities of color, and I struggle with that a little bit.
Well, I think that just speaks to the issue that we have so much more work to do just on the LGBTQ issue. We have work with acceptance of minorities, acceptance of different people. And that's what, when I look out at my congregation, and I'm in the choir and I get to see this, I just see this whole rainbow of people. And it just warms my heart, because I feel like that's what the church should be. It should be people of all different colors, all different races, all different socioeconomic groups, all different sexual orientations, and they're all there together. And that is, the realization that our churches are some of the most segregated, racist organizations in this country is frightening, but it's the reality. Yes. And here we are caught up on this one small, narrow issue when there's so many other things that we, I think, should rightly focus on.
Yeah, a world so divided as ours is today on so many different levels. My goodness, if the church isn't speaking into that, what are we doing? And we're so paralyzed by, this issue, as you're pointing out, that our voice has been mute, and it's a shame. And we've got to change that. Absolutely, we do. Do you want to say something?
I do. Yeah, I'm trans and black, and I was super disturbed by the lack of people of color in the room. I don't think that's because people of color don't support
Right.
or are not gay or LGBT or themselves. I'm disturbed that the conferences that are coming up recent, like, it's going to be all people of color at one mostly, and then the other one, like, not so much.
Yes.
I'm not interested in a new church that holds on to the same systemic racism. I'm not interested in a church that isn't breaking all of the chains. So I don't know. I was pretty frustrated about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing. I want to thank all of you for tonight, and we're just getting started. We could talk a little while longer. But, what we're hoping is that, in seeing this video, that it'll spark conversation, and that's what's happening. People are coming on the page, and they're talking, and these kinds of discussions, I hope and pray they make that impact on the other discussions that are going on all over the country. Hundreds, literally hundreds, some big ones that are taking place. The one in Minneapolis that's starting tomorrow, that's a huge conference. It will make an impact on the conference that's happening in Kansas City. And a lot of what has been said here, I want to thank you for raising these issues, these questions, and you're a blessing to your churches. And I can attest as a pastor, I've seen a church change, and it's been because of relationships. And it's been because people have been willing to stay and to love, and and people change. And this is a lot different church on this issue than it was years ago. And you know what? This pastor is too. We hope to hear you, and we hope that this conversation continues all across the country, but especially here in our conference. God bless you.